An interview with Bjo and John Trimble. This is episode 51.
You're listening to 70s Trek with Bob Turner and Kelly Casto, the fan podcast that looks at Star Trek in the 1970s. It was the decade that built a franchise.
In 1973, David Gerrold wrote The World of Star Trek. In that book, he described the Save Star Trek campaign that convinced NBC to give the show a third season. I'm Bob Turner.
And I'm Kelly Casto. David Gerrold also told the world who led it. This week, we talked to Bjo and her husband, John, about the 1968 letter writing campaign and much, much more. But before we do that, we'd like to tell you how you can find us.
Just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/70strek. And while you're there, we hope you'll leave us a question or a comment. You can also send us an email. That goes to 70strek@gmail.com.
And look for us on iTunes by searching 70s Trek in the podcast section. While you're there, we hope you leave us a rating or a review, because if you do, it will help others find the show.
As a 10-year-old kid in 1973, I first learned about the Trimbles in David Gerrold's book, The World of Star Trek. So I thought I would use his words to introduce them. And I was really tickled when I came across this passage. Gerrold wrote, "All humans are unique, but Bjo is uniquer than most."
I love that.
John,
I would agree with David on that.
John and Bjo, welcome. John, is that true?
I think so, yes.
Well, it may be one of the reasons why we've been married 57 years.
It could be, huh? That's right.
Yeah, I can say honestly, in all that time, I have been vexed to the point of murder several times. Not quite to the point of murder, but I have never been bored.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
That's awesome.
Let's start, Bjo, with something that you told me in a phone call last week, that you actually grew up in Hollywood around the studios. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I grew up in Thousand Oaks, California, which was one of the areas that in Thousand Oaks and Lake Sherwood, where a lot of Western, especially movies, were made. And so, in those days we didn't have police guarding all of the fights, and us kids would hear about a movie being made, and off we go. Sit quietly and watch all the action. And then my mother got a job sewing costumes for Warner Brothers. And at that point, she was divorcing her second husband. Never mind, that's a long story. We moved to several places in Hollywood, not Hollywood proper, but Van Nuys and mostly part of the valley, studio shooting. And so, I basically kind of grew up with at least a good idea of how Hollywood works.
How did you two meet, actually?
Okay. We were
Science fiction
fans, had been for many years, and we were both invited to a party at Forrest J. Ackerman's house.
He was the editor of Famous Monsters of Filmland,
And
a very dear friend.
his birthday was right around the Thanksgiving weekend, so Forrest would have a 3-day party. And his theory was that he can invite one group of people for Friday, another group of people for Saturday, and a third group of people for Sunday, so he could fit them all in. Well, of course, what happened was all the people who came Friday then came on Saturday.
To see who would come.
Yeah. And then they all came on Sunday. So in this house, he had, it was crammed full of books and movie posters and souvenirs and all that sort of stuff. And there was just the usual furniture that you'd have around the living room. So it was chock-a-block, elbow to elbow full of people, and there was really no room anywhere to sit down or anything. You didn't dare sit on the floor, somebody'd step on you. So Corey had a baby grand piano in the room, and
a bunch of us snackled some chips and dip and crawled under the piano. Not a whole bunch of us. There were about 5 of us.
So I knew several of the other people in the group that were under the piano. So I, got under there too. And in the course of the evening, Bjo and I wound up sitting next to each other under there with all the legs crossed over each other and everything. And she had been in the Navy, and I was still in the Air Force at the time. And we discovered that each of us had been in the service. We were alone of the group that was under there. And so we started telling stupid officer stories to each other.
Well, I'll tell you something. There's, women talk about having a handsome man and a wealthy man. My opinion is, if you don't have a guy with a sense of humor, it just ain't worth it.
There you go.
We discovered that we made each other laugh. And we got better acquainted as time went on. I got out of the service.
We love telling people that we met under a baby grand piano because jaws dropped, right? But if you understand fandom, you would realize science fiction fandom. Strange things happen that we take as for granted.
That's cute. That's a really cute story. Very funny. Let me ask about Gene Roddenberry, if I could. When did you first meet him?
We met him at the a World Science Fiction Convention that some of Gene's writer friends had convinced him he needed to come to and bring 3 of his already in the can episodes. It had not been stuff that had not been seen yet.
Okay, the Science Fiction Convention was over Labor Day weekend in Cleveland, Ohio. And it was the following week that Star Trek first aired.
So I had a futuristic fashion show to run, and it was all amateurs in costume, which means it's a lot slower than a regularly run masquerade. And so
fashion show.
I was told I really had to fit all of this in 1 hour. And so I'm busy rehearsing my ladies, and someone comes up and says, we have 3 costumes that this big Hollywood producer would like to put in your fashion show. And I said, you can't. I can't speak more people. And who is this big producer? And they said, Gene Roddenberry. And I said, I don't know who this is. I know you can't be speaking. And they said, but we promised. I said, go on, promise him. And so, about 15 minutes later, I hear a deep voice say, are you Bjo Trimble? And I turned around, and here is this big Irish Nick of a guy with a big smile. And Gene had one of the most charming smiles in the world. And by the way, his son has inherited that. And so anyway, within another few minutes, he had talked his way into my fashion show. However, his model that he'd hired saw a job going down the tubes if they didn't rescue, the situation. So they helped run the show and everything,
They get the models on and off the stage quickly. And
so anyway, he said, when you're in Hollywood next time, give me a call. We'll do lunch. And I thought,
yeah, we both thought, right, that's Hollywood producer talk for,
the story that the newspaper said was that the fans saw the 3 episodes and went wild. Well, it wasn't.
Not so much.
It wasn't exactly that. Certainly, there was applause and cheers and so on, but basically, science fiction fans have been fooled before. Time Tunnel, a sad little thing.
Worst at the bottom of the rating.
Lost in Space, which, by the way, was not supposed to be a kiddie show. And we had seen so many good science fiction ideas just simply devolve into, stuff that nobody wanted to watch. And so we thought, well, let's just see how this one, are we going to get grown-up stuff or not?
So fandom is well known for the willing suspension of disbelief, which is how you can accept the story set in the future or in a different time and so on. Well, the fans had pretty much that attitude towards Star Trek from what they'd seen. They were willing suspension of disbelief, but they were cautious.
Yeah.
That was about it. So then we when we came home, we lived in Oakland at the time, and John.
I was an outside salesman, so I would occasionally have business in L.A.
And we got a babysitter for our kids for the weekend, and I took off with him, which, speaking as a mother, I sort of needed at that point. And we got
the tail end of the week, really.
Yeah, and we got down to L.A. and I said, let's call this bluff, and I called Gene's office. Well, Gene's office door was never closed. It was always open to where his secretary, now they're called, what is it now, personal assistants or something, and the hallway doors, they were almost always open. And so his secretary picked up the phone and said out loud, Bjo Trimble. And Gene picked up the phone and said, where are you and can you come for lunch?
Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
And he was, at that point, he had been battered so much by all of the pundits who knew everything, of course, that this was a cockamamie show. It wasn't following all of the other patterns, and therefore it was going to fail. It wasn't going to last 6 months, and so on and so forth. And then he was hearing from the fans, and they loved it. And so he was inviting them over to Paramount to the set until Paramount found out, at that time, until they found out that he was doing this and, said, this is violating our insurance.
Oh.
And no, you can't keep doing that. So
well, apparently we were privileged characters. I don't know, but we got in anyway. Anytime we were in L.A., we let him know we were going to be there and invite us over.
How nice.
So we got to see a number of episodes being filmed, parts of them.
And, from my earlier movie experience, just, basically as a kid smarking out behind the sets and so on, I've always loved watching movies and TV shows being made. You might spend an hour and a half on something you saw 2 seconds of on the screen. But it was quite wonderful to see, and I always liked this magic of putting it all together. And so introducing John to this was loads of fun, and he became as interested as I was. So that was kind of nice.
That's really neat. But I'm curious, what did you think of him?
Well, we both liked him. I know that an awful lot of people thought he was, pretty sexy too. I never thought of him as that way. And when somebody asked, I said, well, I've got a perfectly good man standing by my side. Thank you very much. And, yeah. But we like him as a person, which is even more important.
That's nice.
And we like him as an extremely creative person. One of the things that a lot of people don't know is that he was a goldsmith. He made some beautiful jewelry out of gold.
Really?
And everybody goes, what? He had a really strong interest in real space. He made friends. He visited JPL a lot. He had friends that he loved to hear science. He loved to hear what was really going on in the world. And in some cases would sort of build, you mention a little thing and then you can build on it, putting it in the future. And he also liked making some statements about things that were going on now, 50 years ago now, that you can take current events that you can't really say out loud, that you can make into a science fiction story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true of all science fiction. And Gene made it true of Star Trek as well.
Yeah, and I think some of those themes really, even today, carry through.
But they do. Let's just be like Your Last Battlefield. Duh. Okay, and they that story comes up time and time again because it hits a basic core of, well, for one thing, sensible thinking on somebody's part, but it was really a good message.
It resonates on several things. First of all, it resonates on color prejudice, of which there's way too much. It resonates on the things that were going on at the time. Remember, this is during the era of Vietnam. It's a powerful episode.
And, you don't think about it because most people, it isn't their favorite episode. And yet, when you see it, you'll sit down and watch it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the same thing with, Today Is Not My Day, the Nazi one.
Patterns of Force. I love that episode.
Okay. All right. But
didn't D. Kelly make a great looking Nazi?
Yes. Yes.
Before he was cast as kindly old Dr. McCoy, he was usually the second or third banana villain.
In Westerns and everything else. He made a great living doing it.
And Gene always worried, by the way, about his ruining Dee's career.
Because after Star Trek went off, nobody was willing to hire Dee to be a villain. Because he was cast as Dr. McCoy. So Gene was kind of worried about having ruined Dee's career. As a matter of fact, it came damn close to ruining D. Kelly. And it was only the fact that Paramount eventually figured out after Star Wars came out that there was money to be this franchise they owned.
Yeah.
And made the first movie.
But then by that time, he was also looking at retirement. So, that was, another factor. But that movie, if you think about it for a minute, the basis was a man who thought he was doing well, thought he was doing good.
Patterns of Force, yeah.
The Patterns of Force. He was what? He was misled, but in his own mind, what he was doing was for the greater good. And
right.
Doesn't that speak to that's spoken to
save us from people who are doing something for the better good.
Right. What do they say about good intentions? The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
And no good deed goes unpunished.
Right, exactly.
We found that out.
Well, why don't we shift gears back to the letter writing campaign? So what led you both to do that in 1968?
We had once more been in L.A., and we'd gone out to the studio, and we'd seen the scene in Deadly Years where Kirk has been restored by Dr. McCoy's magic potion back to, their youth, or not youth, but, the aging had been taken away from him. We noticed a difference in the attitude around the set. We'd seen, from previous times there, it was a very happy, true, and up sort of group. This time it was totally different. Everybody was, all the crew were pretty down. The actors would come off stage, or if they were there, the other ones were there, and they just kind of slumped and looked pretty grim.
And we asked about that, and nobody had an answer. They were all kind of, wary. And so what you do is you go over to the one person of information, the sort of Radar O'Reilly of the movie set, who is, the craft services person, the guy who brings in the coffee and donuts.
Oh, sure.
And
because they know everything.
And they make it good business to know everything. So I asked him, and he said, unofficial word has come down that the show will be canceled at the end of this season.
Oh.
And I said, no, you're unofficial. And he says, yeah. He says, we have not gotten a real official, confirmation yet. But it's pretty,
pretty certain. So we had to leave to go back up to Oakland. So we're driving up the Central Valley in California, which at that time, before the Interstate 5, the interstate highway system, took a lot longer than it does now.
It was a real adventure driving through all these small towns.
We're driving up the Central Valley, and we're saying, we're talking about this. And we knew from stuff we'd been told and stuff we'd read that they wouldn't syndicate a show if it didn't have 3 seasons, which is the way they worked in those days.
Right.
And so we're talking about it and saying, God, if they canceled at the end of this season, it'll just go in the can and never be seen again. And
so then he, and he should have known better. He says these fatal words.
There ought to be something we could do about that. Well, I should know better than say that to her. That's one of her more unique points.
Well, we're all glad you did.
That's right.
But I said, yeah. So then we talked about how to do it. Now, we had no template for any of this because nobody really done something like, a nationwide outreach to people to get something done.
So we talked it back and forth, and by the time we got back home, we formulated the Save Star Trek campaign.
You had created the process at that point?
The process was
totally done it.
Yeah, still kind of shady there, but we could see where we wanted to go with it. And I said, won't do any good unless we know that Gene has not thrown in the towel. If he's thrown in the towel, there's no sense in doing it. And so we called the studio again. And Gene, now I have to say as a caveat here, Gene was a storyteller, and he liked a good story as well as anyone else. So I'm not sure this is totally true, but all right. Gene said, I just came out of a meeting where I told my staff if only we could reach the fans.
And we fell in his lap.
So
we have no idea if that's true or not, but hey,
It sounds good.
Yes.
So the first thing I said, the first thing we have to do is you can't be part of this. Well, I'm telling a producer who, by his own nature, as Gene and his own nature as a producer, is a control freak, right?
Sure.
But he can't play through. And I said no, because NBC will say you orchestrated it. Well, they did anyway, but okay. And so we and he promised he wouldn't get involved, and he sort of kept that promise. So meanwhile, I would go around and ask the secretaries of big companies, what is it about a letter that makes you throw it away, file it in the nut file, answer it yourself, or put it across your boss's desk?
That was brilliant.
And the answers I got were this sheet of paper with about 10 points, I think, that basically said what to do. We did not write letters for people.
Yes, there was no form letter to this. There was this list of things to do and not to do. There were the addresses of the NBC execs.
All of them.
And then we said, okay, now your task is to write a letter, copy this information, and send it to 10 of your friends. Have each of them write a letter, copy the material, and send it to 10 of their friends.
And
that's how it worked.
So now, I mean, this was all by postage, you understand?
Yeah.
Now,
so
right.
we called the people who'd run that science fiction convention in the WorldCon in Cleveland, and we got their mailing list. And we talked to a book dealer who did a lot of mail order book stuff and so on, who was a great guy, and he gave us his mailing list, and then we cobbled together a bunch out of our own mailing list, friends and so on.
And then finally I said, hey, Star Trek gets mail, for goodness sake. Why can't we, tap in that? So we asked Gene. He had no idea.
So we went over to the Paramount mail room and discovered dozens of sacks of mail that
nobody picked up and nobody answered. So
wow.
we got permission to get to those, and they wanted to take all of them home. We said no, but we just pulled letters randomly and took addresses off them, and that was all we had time to do at that point. And just and we, by the time we got done, we had a mailing list of about 4,000 or 5,000 people.
Not that many. I don't think it was. Not 2,000.
Maybe 2. Okay. And then we gathered together some local friends who came over to the house, and I would fix either your big choice with chili, spaghetti, or our food, because that was what we could afford to do. People would bring their own potluck, and
we had an electric mimeograph machine. Well, we didn't have one electric to start with. We got one later on.
You hand crank that.
Had something like that a long time there. And then we'd get everybody to sit down and fold and stuff envelopes and put stamps on and put labels on and
type in addresses and or handwrite them. We were using, by the way, you tell everybody they get to look up mimeograph and typewriter. We basically very, very Spanish sort of thing. It was all hand done and lovingly done, I might add. And Gene did, of course, he had to get his hand in there somehow. And we answered the door to I knocked, and it was a catering company.
This was for the last big
push. Last of it. We had one big last push, and we and it was a catering company that Gene had sent over with all kinds of nice sandwich makings and several pieces of soft drinks and so on.
So that was Gene's contribution?
When we invite people to a party, they would look at us and say, is this a real party or a work party?
Bad reputation at that time. So we got it all out, and to our major surprise, it worked. And our phone rang off the wall for hours after that voiceover came that said, it will be renewed for a third season. Don't write any more letters, thank you. And of course, about the 2,000 Star Trek fans turned around and wrote thank you letters.
Wow.
Which cost them to open because they were following the directions of putting it in a business envelope.
So on the night that they did the voiceover thing, we were in a department store, I think it was a Sears, shopping for something. I don't remember what it was, refrigerator or something like that. And so we realized it was about time for Star Trek to be on. So we went over to the electronic department, and they had Star Trek up on about 4 TVs. And we watched the episode that was on. I couldn't tell you what the name of it was at the moment. And then we get this voiceover toward the end that said, And one announced that Star Trek has been renewed for a third season. And
of course, John was like, "Oh well, how about that?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Right. I mean, obviously, it dawned on you. Oh my God! Look at all the work we did. It worked.
Yeah,
well, I mean,
exactly.
When we first heard it, it was kind of a say what kind of, I mean, we kind of didn't believe it. It was like, did you hear that? Yeah. And then, as I say, by the time we got home, the phone was ringing, and it didn't stop ringing until about 3 o'clock the next morning. And it was
What a great moment!
Yeah, it really was, and it's just sort of, and to really succeed at that was, and then we tell people, okay, here's the basis of the whole thing. Write 10 people and ask them to write 10 people and ask them to write 10 people. Only with a computer, you can do by the hundreds or even the thousands. I mean, everybody has at least 100 people they know on the internet, right? Yeah. And some of us can go to thousands. So, I mean, think how fast something can spread. How come you didn't help Firefly? I said, we sent them the information on how to do this. And they didn't believe it would work, and they didn't follow it.
They didn't believe it would work?
Yeah.
Correct.
Wow.
I don't know what they think. I don't know what they think we were doing,
Right.
But or they figure, oh well, that was 50 years ago. It won't work today. Well, let me tell you a little something. It can work today. We got a call. It's now about 12, 14 years ago. From a friend at JPL, and he said, we just got word that the Luddites in Congress, and God, we have a lot of them, are going to cancel the Pluto program. And if they do, our next chance at having Pluto close enough to reach will be 288 years from now, or some such figure. And
said these magic words. Is there anything you can do about that?
Huh.
And we said yes. So basically, we wrote one letter. I love this. One letter of appeal, and to get on it now, because if they canceled it, then the funding would go away. And we sent it out, and I called up all the Star Trek fan clubs I knew, all of the individual people that might be interested. John came up with all of the space groups that we could find, and we punched one button.
Wow.
And reached millions of people. It was one of these, wow, okay then.
And as a result of that, New Horizons flew past Pluto.
So,
That's great.
now, yes, by the way, there's another man credited for all of this on the Pluto program, and he was very tenacious, nice man, worked over at JPL or something. We don't want to take anything away from him, but there were more people working on it. Let's just put it that way. And so this does work if people will just follow. But the rules are so simple. Washington Post phoned for an interview, and they said, how does this really work? So I explained the rule of 10. And they said, well, that can't work. It's too simple.
And people said, well, you may very well be right. No.
And someone said, you hung up on the Washington Post? I said, well, they called me a liar. Why do I want to talk to them?
I think it's amazing that in the age before computers, before social media, before email, that you were able to pull this off with a mimeograph machine and writing letters. That's amazing.
We're still amazed by it.
We don't really realize,
we pulled it off twice.
Well, yeah.
Because the campaign to name the first shuttle Enterprise, nobody had any idea it wasn't going to go into space, but
Go ahead, tell us more about that.
Two guys in the East Coast, one of whom was later responsible for the Space on Mars brouhaha, but they thought the first shuttle should be named Enterprise. And what's
and so they asked us how to run a campaign.
We told them they couldn't quite get it off the ground. And after about a month or a month and a half, they said, listen, we have got time to devote to this and so on. Here, we'll send you the stuff that we have, and you do it.
And it was one of those, wait. But anyway, it arrived, and it was one of these things where a whole bunch of people really had faith in this, and they didn't know how to go about it. And so we put out the information again. And even if the Enterprise did not fly in space, the point is that all Enterprise ships have always been or had something innovative on it that was experimental.
Or the first of their kind,
Yeah. So we're and I had an astronaut whose name I cannot give you right now because I don't remember it. This is 50 years ago. Say,
not quite, but,
we kind of resent your interfering with NASA like this. We have the right. We are citizens. NASA is ours.
We're paying your salary, man.
Yeah, and when you come right down to it, all we were trying to do was get public interest. NASA in those days had the amazing ability to pull the most triumphant thing they did and make it go. And so, really, I mean, honestly, their publicity people needed to be.
They've gotten better,
but only marginally. Anyway, so I said I didn't care if they named it Fred, but the point is that Enterprise reached the public. Everybody knew what the USS Enterprise was. I mean, really, even people who say I never watched TV. It's funny how most of them can kind of casually be over at a friend's house that has a television set on Star Trek night. But the thing is that
Enterprise grabbed people and it motivated people. And the day before the rollout of the Enterprise, they'd originally named it Constitution. And some NASA people were in President Ford's office, and he said, I know you folks have named the shuttle Constitution, but I rather fancy the name Enterprise. And so that night, they painted out Constitution and painted in Enterprise. And when they rolled it out the next morning, the paint was still wet.
Wow.
And the fun thing was they couldn't figure out what to do with me. John couldn't come because of his stupid job. But I could, and thanks to Larry Niven and Gary Purnell, science fiction authors, they got me out to Edward. And at the reception the night before the rollout, nobody knew what to do with me. I wasn't really an important person, right? I mean, not in their lives. And yet I was there and something had to be done with me. So somebody evidently told this young lady, secretary or whatever she was, to ask me if I would take a press pass instead of a VIP pass. And when she said that, a newspaper friend of ours said, "Take the press pass. We get more booze." Okay, Neil.
Lots more handouts.
Yeah, and lots more handouts. So, as it turned out, the VIPs had one shaded area with a couple of tables with food and booze and a bunch of handouts. The press had 2 Quonset huts full of handouts
and bars.
And I mean, you couldn't carry it all. You had to have somebody else carry it. So they put the press over in one part, and of course the VIPs are over there. When they rolled out the Enterprise, the press was right under the wing bay. I mean, we were that close to it.
Wow.
And I'm standing on a folding chair doing a death-defying act, on folding chairs and yelling, "We did it! We did it! We did it! We did it! We did it!" So, being my crazy person again, and it was just grand. It was just great. And yes, there were loads of VIPs, and I was not one of them, and that's okay because I had a press pass, which, by the way, did me a lot of good later. It got me in.
Parlayed there.
Well, I parlayed it into a press pass for John. We were at several of the flybys, and we got to meet Dr. I'm sorry, again, the whole
Clyde Tombaugh.
Clyde Tombaugh.
Discoverer of Pluto.
Dear little man, and got to talk to him and his wife, and it was made my whole day.
And we were near him when a reporter came over. This was the Saturn flyby, and there were all sorts of things, the braided rings and the little moonlets and all kinds of stuff about the rings that, of course, nobody ever thought of. And this reporter walked over to Tombaugh and said, "Well, Professor Tombaugh, what is it like to have all that you knew about Saturn disproven?" And Tombaugh looked at him and just let that question sit for a minute to just kind of make the guy a little uncomfortable, and said, "Sonny, that is the most important thing that can happen to a scientist. Now he's got all sorts of stuff to explore and to come up with."
That's better than killing the reporter, I guess. So.
Next week, part 2 of our interview with Bjo and John Trimble.
See you then.
Thanks for listening to 70s Trek, an independent fan production. Join us next week as we explore more about the production, the actors, the producers, and the influencers of Star Trek in the lost decade of the 1970s on 70s Trek.